what is the damage someone contemplating surgery? What is the damage that they are doing by not getting surgery, by not living?
Mm-hmm.
And that was 10 months for me of watching the world go by,
Yeah.
and there's emotional things to deal with that. There's physical, all that muscle that I was adding, that
Right.
I spent years adding. I mean, that's all atrophied at this point, right? I
Yeah.
mean, my surgeon told me this, and he had been doing this 30 years, and no one else had mentioned this through the entire process. And he said it gets to a point where the disc can, what it's called, calcify,
Okay.
where he said, no matter how long you wait, no matter what you do, it's not going to heal.
Right.
So he's like, you can't really tell by looking at an MRI. I never
Mm-hmm.
heard it. He never told me if mine was or not,
Right.
but that is something to consider from someone who'd been doing this for a long time.
Hi, everyone. It's me, CK, the creator and host of the podcast Bed, Back, and Beyond. Most likely, if you found my podcast, it's because you've injured your back or neck. I herniated a disc in 2019, and I will never forget the physical and emotional trauma that came with that injury. The fear, anxiety, the stress, depression, feelings of loneliness, like I would be stuck and never able to get back to normal life. It was all so real. I scoured the internet looking for stories of successful treatment just to give myself some hope. And that's why I created the Bed Back Beyond podcast. I wanted to give a one stop shop of positive recovery stories from serious neck or back injury to those of you in need. And this is where I would like to ask for your help. If I have been an encouragement to you in any way, would you consider hitting the subscribe or follow button? I would love to get this podcast out there more and in front of the eyes of those who need it. And also, I would love to find people who are willing to share their positive story of recovery from any type of back or neck injury. If you're someone who would like to share your story on the show, head over to bedbackbeyond.com and click share your story.
You're listening to Bed, Back, and Beyond, sharing positive stories of recovery from serious back or neck injury. Your host is CK, whose favorite tarantula is the cobalt blue. On this episode, we're joined by Chris Carey, whose smooth recovery makes getting a microdiscectomy look easy.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me on the Bed, Back, and Beyond podcast. Before we dive into your injury, I'd love just to learn a little bit about you, your hobbies, what you do for a living, whatever you'd like to share.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. 37-year-old, always active, San Diego, living in San Diego, but originally from Texas. So, been in tech sales my entire career. A lot of desk sitting that we're going to
Mhm.
talk about today. But yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Sure. I love San Diego. Have a girlfriend out there. The weather's amazing.
Yeah, they call it a big playground. You know, when it rains here, it's like a holiday. I like to celebrate a little bit, get to cozy in.
I think she's on Bankers Hill. Is that right? Does that sound right?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. And when you contacted me, you said that during the pandemic, you had gotten into weightlifting.
yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Y would love to. Complicated relationship with weightlifting, obviously, why we're talking today. So I've always been active. I played basketball and football growing up. After that, and I started getting in my 20s, I started getting into long distance cycling in Austin. It's very big there. So we would do, 100-mile bike rides. So I've always been active. But when the pandemic hit, I was still doing the bike riding, but obviously the sports was kind of gone away. So found an outdoor gym here in San Diego, which is a blessing,
Hmm.
and started doing heavy weightlifting.
Like right off the
And
bat.
yeah, and I had never really got into it all that much. I actually did a 23andMe DNA test, interestingly enough,
Uh-huh.
and it said that I have a gene that actually lets me build muscle faster than others. So I was like, oh,
Oh,
let's see what that's like. Yeah. So I got into weightlifting, was working out with a personal trainer, absolutely
okay.
loved it. I mean, I was putting on muscle like crazy, felt the
Mhm.
strongest I've ever felt, and yeah, led me to uh, having probably the worst year of my life, doing heavy weights with poor form, trying to be the
Oh,
strongest guy in the gym. Yeah.
yeah, there is something addicting about picking up weights that you never thought you could do before. And,
Yeah.
hey, I'm actually strong.
Yeah, exactly.
I did
You
some
know,
weightlifting years ago,
yeah, tell
and
me about it.
yeah. Worked with a personal trainer. I always had a history of bad back. It would just throw out like every other year. My entire family was like that. So I don't think that the weightlifting led to my injury, but I
Yeah.
did deadlift 195 pounds,
Oh, that's awesome.
but I
Yeah.
haven't gone back to it.
No, do you think you'll be back?
I would love to.
Yeah, really? Okay.
Yeah. I've moved so many times in the past 5 years that we haven't been settled enough to get back into it. At least that's my
Yeah.
excuse anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's been, obviously, I love it, but it makes me wonder is it worth it?
Mhm.
Because, I'll start telling the story. Um, it was October of 2022,
Mhm.
and I was doing deadlifts and at the same time was doing back squats.
Okay. Yeah.
And I left the gym walking out like a cowboy. Like, it wasn't like one defining moment. I was just
Okay.
kinda like bow-legged leaving the gym. And then we went to Mexico for a wedding, my wife and I did in November the next month, and I still didn't really feel right. And I remember a friend of mine was like, "Hey, just wanna let you know you're walking like a high school football coach." And that kinda stuck with me, and I'm like, "Okay, that's interesting." And
But no
then
pain at this point.
just uncomfortable, which had
Okay.
kinda come and gone my entire life, but
Mhm.
nothing like what I was about to experience. And then right after Christmas, New Year's, I had sciatica so bad down the leg, I couldn't straighten my foot.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it would get better for a couple days, and then it
Mhm.
would, I would start to have, the ability to walk a little bit, and then it would come and go. But yeah, and then, you know, February, I met with my primary care doctor and was just kinda talking about how uncomfortable it was, and they kinda brushed me off.
Oh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I was 36 at the time, and they were kinda hoping that maybe it would just heal on its own.
Okay.
So then I went back a month later and said, "Hey, this isn't getting any better." And at this point, I mean, the pain it wasn't as bad as it was going to get later in the future, spoiler alert, but,
Mhm.
it was, routinely a 7.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was going to the doctor, and finally I had to, like, stand up for myself, which I think is one of the things I learned coming out of this is you really
Right.
gotta be a little bit pushy to get the care,
And
and
you
then it
hear that
just
a lot.
yeah, you just continue to progress from there. Come March, it was, finally got connected with a specialist who said, "Let's get an MRI."
Okay. And that's
Went
March
back
of this year, right?
March of this year. Yeah,
Okay.
so I had been uncomfortable for 4 months at this point,
Mhm.
with days of horrible pain, days of, "Okay, I can walk a little bit."
Mhm.
So then come April, I get a steroid shot, and I know you
The
have some
X-ray guide it?
yeah, the X-ray, we had a CT scan guided.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know you had some experience with those, so I wanna talk to you about that. But
Yeah.
so I had my first one and ended up leaving and having a good couple weeks.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then, yeah, it just continued to worsen. So was that your experience with the steroid shots as well?
It was,
Yeah,
you leave the day of like, "Hey, I'm out of pain completely,"
right.
but that's because they've used some numbing agent, some lidocaine, and then it started to wear off, and they had I don't know if they did this, but they had given me a sheet of paper, like, "Track every day what your pain is from
Yeah,
1 to 10," with no explanation what did a 7 mean? What did a 10 mean? I didn't
yeah,
know, and then, I was moving around a little bit, and I think 2 weeks after, I can't remember the timing at this point, I tripped going
yeah,
up the steps,
okay,
and I threw my leg out my bad leg out in front of me to catch me, and it just sent me all the way back to original pain level.
yeah. So did they tell you how big your herniation was?
I They didn't.
They never
No.
did? Yeah,
Did you
I
yeah,
actually had to ask a few times. So that was, I think, the first herniation. And I have found after talking with people and talking to doctors and trying to dig for information, it really seems like the first herniation can turn in and can repeat itself. It can heal and then go backwards and heal and then go backwards. So
right.
I think I was healing to a point.
Okay.
And then whatever move I did, still in pain,
Mhm,
still can't walk around the block,
mhm.
having another herniation. And that point, that was May, coming off that
Okay.
steroid shot, maybe 3, 4 weeks with that steroid shot,
Right,
had another herniation, went back. I mean, my pain was a 10. It was absolutely miserable. Ended up going to
right.
the ER.
Yeah.
So that was the first ER trip.
By
So
ambulance, or did your wife take you?
Um, Wife took me.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have to call the ambulance. I had to do that previously, so I'm like, I'm gonna tough this through. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, so ended up, same thing, doing an MRI just to make sure it wasn't, any red flag symptoms as they call them, which
Right.
is relative in my opinion, because
Mhm.
pain was a 10. I hadn't
Yeah.
left the house in 6 months at the point. So, and then at that point, again, I'm 37 now, and I'm starting to realize that it's not really progressing. I have days or weeks progressing. I'm sure you're feeling this as well, but
Right.
it's not my big picture term isn't on the up and up.
Mhm.
So I go back to the doctor and I'm like, what's the plan here? And she's like, let's give another shot. Let's get another cortisone shot.
Okay.
So I went and had a second one, and now we're in late June. And again, I just had this herniation, the second one.
Right.
And I went in and I had a steroid shot. And for those of you who are listening who are contemplating and getting fast forward 30 seconds because they're not always like this,
Yeah.
it was the worst pain of my life.
Getting the steroid shot.
Getting steroid shot.
Wow. So they didn't put you under or anything like that?
Nothing. Told me to lay on my belly, and I had a hard time doing that.
Yeah.
And then the doctor, who's been doing this 40 years, came in on his day off to do a couple steroid shots, and it was like I think he has Wednesdays off. And I'm getting wheeled out in a wheelchair, and he says, "You need surgery."
Oh, jeez.
So I'm like, okay, well, when his job is to like coach people to not have to progress to surgery, and he's like yelling at me to get
Right.
surgery as I'm getting wheeled out.
So are you saying that the injection like the needle itself was the most painful or the after effect of the
The
cortisone?
needle, no, the needle itself,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
I
So you
guess,
felt nothing.
yeah. The first
And
one I felt great. I felt nothing at
yeah.
all. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I interviewed a man a couple episodes ago who had the cortisone injection, and
Mm,
the actual injection was fine, but the cortisone filled the space and caused even more pressure on the nerve so
yeah.
that the injections, like, made his pain, uh, even worse.
Maybe that's actually what happened. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
at the moment of injection. I mean, it was like it was horrible pain down the legs, horrible sciatic pain.
Wow.
Yeah. So then about a week later, another ER trip just to make sure I didn't have the red flag symptoms, any permanent damage.
Right.
Ended up I got pretty good at going to the ER, so I took a phone charger and headphones, called in Ubers.
Mhm.
My wife didn't have to leave work, which
Right.
was kind of
Just
crazy in
sit around
hindsight.
and wait.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So then at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm nearing kind of the point of my journey. It's been almost 8 months of not being able to walk around the block.
Right.
And at some points, I would get there to where I would feel like, okay, I can walk down the end of the street. But in hindsight, that was nothing. I couldn't step off a curb for almost a year, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so then I ended up doing my own research, which I know is a saying these days, but for this one, I tend to agree. Ended up finding a back practice clinician in Pasadena. And his whole belief system is 95% of people with back pain do not want to have surgery.
Mhm.
And I get there and I pay a lot of money to see this guy out of pocket. And I'm like looking for anything to
Yeah.
not have to do surgery, right? We
Okay.
spend we spend 4 hours together. He tests everything and he talks about how he used to be a doctor. He's an MD,
Okay.
but he was working with these folks that were my condition, and everybody calls them red flag symptoms, but there are yellow flag symptoms that the medical people do not look at.
Okay. Would you like to name what those symptoms are?
Numbness in any type of the groin area
Mhm.
whatsoever.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's one, but there's very specific, like erectile dysfunction would be
Right.
one that's not reflected in the medical
Wow.
community. They don't
Okay.
see that as a red flag symptom. And then numbness, around the buttocks area, anything like that. So he was like, "Yes, some of this is, you need to watch out for these yellow flag symptoms." And then he pulls up my MRIs. And again, this guy's entire business is like, "We're gonna get through this without surgery." And he says, "If I'm gonna continue to work with you, you have to sign a liability waiver if you're not gonna do the surgery." Yeah, he said, "Luckily," again, back to the DNA test, I'm a big person, and he said,
Mhm.
"Luckily, your spinal canal is large, so
Okay.
you're actually able to take this herniation." but he
Okay.
said my 19 millimeter herniation was
Oh,
the largest he had seen, and he can't believe I was walking.
wow. Yeah.
So at that point, I was like, "Yeah, we gotta
19
start.
millimeters.
Yeah, we gotta start talking surgery."
Mhm.
Um, and then, looking for a surgeon. I know I'm rambling at this point. I'm really passionate
I'm
about this, so I apologize.
no.
But we ended up talking with a surgeon, and just didn't really click. And again,
Okay.
back to one of the lessons, you kind of have to advocate for yourself. And I
Mhm.
demanded to meet another surgeon who I
Yeah.
ended up just was an angel on earth. And
What
uh,
kinda surgeon? Neuro
uh,
or ortho or
ortho, yeah,
Mhm.
ortho, and great surgeon, great team, and ended up having surgery. You'll love this on August 29th.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yes. Anniversary, surgery buddies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you had yours on August 29th as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah,
2019.
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of
So
the high level of my story. I know we want to talk details, but I mean,
yeah,
I guess the steroid shots, it helped. The ER trips, they helped ease of mind, but ultimately having to do the surgery, and it's
right.
one of the best things I ever did for myself.
Which disc did you herniate?
L4, L5,
Okay, me too.
twins.
Yeah. So I just wanna, clarify, so you herniated in October,
Yep,
and then you said you had a second herniation?
I did.
Meaning, did you start to fix the first herniation? Like, did that start to feel better and then the pains returned? Or do you think that your herniation got bigger the second time?
I think the herniation got bigger.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the herniation got bigger. At no point from October until 2 days after surgery could I walk around the block comfortably.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do many steps. I was my it was so compressed that I had no freedom of movement. I couldn't step off the curb without excruciating pain. So
Yeah.
it never went down. The pain never really went down all that much, but I
Okay.
think I just re-herniated as well, made it bigger.
Okay.
Yeah,
I do wonder if I did almost like a two-stage herniation
yeah,
'cause, my dogs pulled me backwards on a
yeah,
walk in the end of April, and it just made my back throw out, which then, of course, just weakens the muscle, so there's no support, and then I just started getting, like, a weird pinch in my left glute, and that kinda lived there for months and wouldn't get better, but then the end of June, I rolled over to get out of bed, and that's when I got hit with, like, call the ambulance and call
yeah,
get me to the ER type pain.
yeah,
But I do think that that initial pinching in the glute had to be the start of the herniation.
yeah. Let me ask you this: when you roll over in bed now, do you think about it? You still
Oh,
have
yeah.
that some of that emotional. You do, right? Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I do
Just the
too.
just the other night, it was the middle of the night, I kinda was in that waking up,
Yeah.
and I did a sharp turn where I turned the top of my body first and then brought my hips over, and
Mm.
it didn't hurt, but the movement snapped me wide awake, and I was like, "Did I do anything?" Yeah, so I still kinda log roll in and out,
Yeah.
there's just
Oh,
some movements
definitely.
that
Yeah.
you hold on to.
Yeah. When I was looking around for that, doctor in Pasadena who's Stu McGill trained, he wrote Back Mechanic,
Right.
which I love that book. But one of his questions that got really excited for me to meet him was, "Do you have confidence rolling over in bed?"
Oh,
And I thought that was such a great question because I was like, "No, not at all." So
no.
I guess if you're when you're rolling, when you're trying to move over, any leg that's up, you're supposed to push off on that leg to roll over.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so, yeah, body mechanics are changed forever for the
right.
good.
But
Yeah.
when you're, like, half asleep, you're not really thinking
Yeah.
about your
Yeah, yeah.
So, did you try physical therapy at any point before
Oh,
your
I
surgery?
completely neglected I obviously,
That's
have
why I
a
got notes.
yeah, no, great. I, have a loaded, relationship with physical therapy because in that January to February phase,
Mhm.
and February, March as well, I was doing physical therapy.
Okay.
And I'm sure they meant well, but I felt like in hindsight they had me doing some things that were not in best interest for me.
Mhm.
One that stuck out to me was I was being coached to do nerve glides,
Mhm.
and the messaging was to push through the pain.
Oh. Okay.
which in hindsight, I didn't know at the time. I had
Mhm.
no idea is not what you're supposed to do for nerve glides.
Yeah.
So
And just to clarify, nerve glides laying on your back with your leg up or the bending over to touch your toes kind?
seated,
Oh, okay.
seated toes. Yeah, that.
And head down.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, had me doing those, pushing through the pain. It was painful.
Mhm.
And then ended up trying, let's see, did I go back to physical therapy? I'm not sure, but I'm in physical therapy now
Right.
post-surgery, and,
Mhm.
the team is fabulous, and some of the questions that I learned to ask in the previous one is, "Tell me about your experience with people from this back injury, with this back surgery," things like that, and
Mhm.
they're great. So, yeah, I'm in physical therapy once a week for, the 6 months here.
Okay. So August. So how many weeks out does that make you from your surgery?
I just celebrated 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah,
Okay.
3 months, yeah.
And
It was a good day, yeah.
yeah.
I'm like it's funny, I'm always gonna look at that date, and I always kinda have a North Star to how long it's been from that just because it was so life-changing.
Yeah.
Coming out of that surgery, they coach you to walk as much as possible, and
Mhm.
again, me being an athlete, I was like, "I'm gonna break some records," which I shouldn't have done. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
You can't push yourself too hard after
Yeah, I
yeah.
did, but, I mean, I think I took some, prescription pills for 2 days afterwards. On day
Okay.
3, I hit 10,000 steps doing circles around the living room.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
life-changing. So, yeah, I always celebrate that day.
Now was it that doctor saying you have to sign a waiver that convinced you, or did you have any other symptoms come up that said, "I gotta get surgery"?
I was leaning towards it just because it had
Mhm.
been so long, life is short, and I hadn't left the house in 10 months at that time, so
Right.
my wife's great. She was super supportive through the whole time, but at some point, I don't want her to go to dinner alone anymore, so
Sure.
it's kind of weighing on me. And I know that I listened to the podcast where you talked about some of the guilt that you have from being injured and things like that. So
Yeah.
it was weighing on me. And then, yeah, meeting that doctor and having him stress, like, hey, I'm open to work with you, but if we're going to move forward, like, I can't assume any liability here. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a
Yeah.
big thing there. That was
Right.
kind of the last card to fall, if you will.
Right. Yeah, because you can you I don't judge anyone who decides to skip surgery and do exercise
Yeah,
instead. A lot of
yeah.
people have, success stories with that too, but if you wait too long, you're going to cause some permanent nerve damage. And I imagine with a 19 millimeter herniation, that permanent nerve damage was at the forefront of your brain.
So there's 2 points there. One is what is the damage someone contemplating surgery, what is the damage that they are doing by not getting surgery, by not living?
Mm-hmm.
And that was 10 months for me of watching the world go by,
Yeah.
and there's emotional things to deal with that. There's all that muscle that I was adding, that
Right.
I spent years adding. I mean, that's all atrophied at this point, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
so it was just my cardio fitness. I've got an Apple Watch, and like every week, I was just watching it go down. And there's a direct correlation between longevity and cardio fitness, and I was just
Right.
watching that go down. So uh, there is that, and then my surgeon told me this, and he had been doing this 30 years, and no one else had mentioned this through the entire process. And he said it gets to a point where the disc can, what it's called, calcify,
Okay.
where he said, no matter how long you wait, no matter what you do, it's not going to heal.
Right.
So he's like, you can't really tell by looking at an MRI. I
Mm-hmm.
never heard it. He never told me if mine was or not.
Right.
But that is something to consider from someone who'd been doing this for a long time.
Right.
He'd been an orthopedic surgeon for a long time. So that
Right.
is something to consider, right?
Yeah,
Is
most people are hoping it'll reabsorb or just pull away a little bit
Yeah,
from the
and
nerve.
sometimes it just won't, right? And
Yeah,
maybe mine would have, and then, I was moving my body strange, ended up herniating again, as I mentioned, and maybe at that point it was just not going to budge.
right.
So I would say, the surgery was great. Obviously, it can be surgery is scary. You don't want surgery, you don't have to.
Sure.
So go through all the things that we've talked about today and try and avoid
Right.
it. But yeah, it was the best thing I ever did for myself.
As a man, how did you handle it emotionally during the stuck at home, can't go outside? Were you
As a
stoic
Oh, horribly. I
Right.
handled it yes. I handled it horribly. I reclused, I didn't call anybody.
Okay.
Yeah, just I am not really one to ask for help, so that was the whole thing, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
no, I handled it horribly, and in hindsight, I mean, it was just I think, as a man and some of the gender roles that we have,
Uh-huh.
we're not supposed to show weakness.
Right.
I've come to terms with that, so I
Yeah.
didn't. I just laid in bed and acted like I
Yeah.
was comfortable doing that for almost a year, so,
I had this false illusion in my
yeah,
head for
yeah,
years, like, "Oh, if I ever got injured or if I had to deal with that, I would be amazing at it.
yeah.
I'd handle it just fine." And then I get humbled by a herniated disc, but struggled with wanting to show my emotions. My husband at one point had to say to me, like, "Can you just cry? Like, I can feel the tension in your shoulder." 'Cause you
Wow.
for some reason, you think, "If I cry, people are gonna think I'm weak."
Yeah.
I just don't know why we do that.
Did you cry when he said that?
Oh,
I
yeah.
imagine immediate tears, right?
Yeah,
Immediate tears.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And he said he could just feel the tension leave my shoulders.
yeah.
Yeah. How did your wife handle you being hurt? I don't often, like, dive into the spouse.
I mean, if I was gonna have a spouse with the characteristics of somebody that could handle that, it would be her.
That's
She
great.
is a trained social worker. She's a
Okay,
therapist. She's
awesome.
getting her California her social worker license this year. So it's like, as anybody is prepared to handle some type of instance like that, she was prepared. So I think she's finally admitted she was kind of tired of doing stuff alone or doing stuff with friends. So now we're like
Yeah.
going out of our way to do extra things out of the house. I think it's
Mhm.
sun goes down at 4:45 here right now, so it might be tough to go out on weekdays, but yeah, we're still
Yeah.
getting through it, so you just celebrate that a little bit. But yeah, I think it's not easy, but
Mm-mm.
she had the characteristic and the skill set to be a rock star through it. She was great.
Yeah, I couldn't have done it without my husband.
Yeah,
But I know it bothered him because he just wanted to be able to take my pain away,
yeah,
and he was completely helpless. So
yeah,
it has some emotional impact on our spouses as well.
yeah, for sure.
I'm
Yeah,
glad she was a rock for you.
yeah, definitely.
So how was your healing after the surgery? Did you have ups and downs, or has it been a pretty smooth ride since then?
I feel guilty talking about this because I know you had some pain
Eh,
after your surgery, right?
yeah, yeah.
I minimal. I
That's
mean,
great.
life changing.
And with such a big herniation, that's, like, unbelievable.
I'm so lucky. I
Yeah.
mean, my day, if you were to rate my days on a scale of 1 to 10 going through this, it was a 1 for months.
Mhm.
And it's taught me coming out of that now every day is like an 8 or 9 or 10. I mean, it's just like I'm smiling, I'm laughing, like the
Mhm.
pain's gone. I mean,
That's great.
I woke up, I was a little uncomfortable from the surgery for 2 days.
Mhm.
And then again, I was practically running laps around the living room just
Yeah.
doing figure eights. My wife finally had to leave because she was trying to watch TV, and I kept walking in front of the TV. No, it was great, and no pain. No, I have had no herniation scares, reherniation scares.
Yeah.
I know 10 to 20% can
Mhm.
reherniate. So
Right.
that may happen to me. I'm open to that. I'm not
Mhm.
fearful of it, but it's something I'm
Right.
aware of. But I took a 3-hour flight about a month ago
Oh,
to go
okay.
see family and friends,
Mhm.
and that was mostly fine.
Wow.
Yeah, after that, well, to do the flight, I didn't carry on a bag. I checked it.
Mhm.
Like, why even try and
Smart.
lift it and put it up, you know?
Right.
And then I set an alarm on my phone every 30 minutes. I had to just do a lap in the plane. So sorry for all the other passengers, but I was just up every 30 minutes doing a
Yeah.
lap.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
I got off that flight and I had a little numbness in the
Mhm.
calves, both calves.
Yeah.
But it went away in a few days. And my PT was like, "That's gonna happen for the next 2 years. Don't worry about
Okay.
it. As long as it's
Yeah.
no dramatic pain, like, just be cool about it." So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And how many weeks after surgery did you start physical therapy?
I waited 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I was cleared after a month, but again, with the bad experience with PT, I had to, like,
Mhm.
gear myself up for that. So
Okay.
after the surgery, I had a 1-month follow-up, with the surgeon's assistant, and she was like, "Everything is great. Let's start PT." And I was like, "Well, think I need some time to kind of trust these guys again. So
Yeah, yeah.
ended up doing some research and finding out some people, that I can respect and kind of trust to go through that. So about 6 weeks after that.
Okay. Yeah, 6 weeks is the norm, I think,
Yeah.
because they say the disc has kinda scarred over at that point, so it's a little
Yeah.
bit stronger, but there's doctors out there that are sending people 2 weeks after their surgery. Depends on how aggressive this doctor is, I guess.
That feels a little ambitious to me.
Yeah,
Just I'm not a doctor, don't pretend to be.
sure.
Yeah, but that would have felt a little ambitious. I think walking did me right. I was trying to walk as much as possible.
Right.
I was just not moving the back. I would
Mhm.
log roll. I actually was it's funny you talk about how you still log roll. I was at PT yesterday and I was like, "You got to see my log roll form." And I rolled over to to lay down onto the bed, and she's like, "That is such good form, such good log roll form." So, I mean, I still do those things, but I mean,
Yeah,
trying to hit physical therapy 2 weeks after feels pretty aggressive. But you got to listen to your body, right?
right,
I wasn't able to do that yet.
right. That's great. You're like the poster guy for herniated disc success story.
For
I'm s
Kool-Aid Manning through the whole thing, and just yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I mean, I feel lucky. I know I listened to that podcast of you, talking about some of your scares and the other
Mhm.
guest talking about his scares, and I think it's pretty common. But I've just been
Yeah.
really lucky through the whole thing. I mean, I just got back from another 3-hour flight back to Texas, and
Mhm.
again, checked the bag, did the 30-minute trick. If I'm going to
Yeah.
do the dishes, I take a knee. I don't rotate, flex the spine, whatever. I mean, I'm just
Right.
relearning body mechanics, but yeah, really lucky. Yeah.
That is great. And you are on Reddit. Are you in the sciatica and microdiscectomy or just, communities? Which one?
Yeah, both. I think we talked about this a little bit before we jumped on. I felt a lot of the times where I was taking a machete through the wilderness trying to figure out what this injury was.
Right.
So I'm going out of my way to try and help people that are still dealing with that. So I'm on both. I think it's Chris_Phoenix, Phenix. I'd love to help talk about this if anyone has additional questions. But yeah, still on Reddit, still trying to help people because,
That's
I
great.
would have loved some help going through that as
Yeah.
well.
I really appreciate people come back to say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm a success story," and answering questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote some pretty detailed, I'm sure they're still up, some pretty detailed week summaries coming out of surgery. I think I did the
Mhm.
first 4 weeks of like each day, what kind of pain level it was, what I did. At one point I was in a recliner and the recliner fell back and it was like, am I okay? And I was like, I was totally fine.
Okay.
So there's details like going through that of like what you might experience. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other points that you think you would love to touch on before we wrap up?
Yeah. So I know you talk about tools post surgery.
Mhm.
I don't think I heard this one mentioned. Obviously, the claw, and
Right.
then I heard a claw for the claw, which which is a brilliant idea. I wish I would have
Right,
thought
when
about
you
that.
drop the first one.
Yeah, I felt a little. I wouldn't call it claustrophobic, but I wanted to get out of the bedroom and get out of bed.
Mhm.
But I wanted like a good chair to be in, because
Yeah,
you're not supposed to be sitting for extended periods of time.
right.
So I actually got a post surgery recliner.
Oh,
And it's on Amazon. I think it was like 300 bucks. It's some of the best money I've spent for myself because it's
okay.
motorized and it can
That's nice.
stand up. Yeah, I think it's actually for
Oh,
people going through hip surgeries.
okay.
So you can motorize it to help you assist to stand up. So what I do and what I did is I would flex my core and then
Uh-huh,
stand up to a point where I could then push my hips forward. So I wasn't
okay.
ever flexing the spine. It was really helpful. I know we talked about selling it and putting the old chair back in. I'm like, I kind of have an emotional tie to it. I don't know if I want to get rid of it now. It doesn't really go
Kinda
with
wish
the
my
aesthetic.
bed did that to me in the morning just to get
Yeah.
me out faster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's the big one that we've missed is that chair was a real helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. Put a little picture on the video of it.
Yeah, great.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you taking the time out to discuss your herniation with us. I mean, the more positive stories that get out there, the better I think we can make people feel. So I really do appreciate you joining me on Bed Back and Beyond.
Appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you doing this. I think a
Yeah,
lot of people are going to find help this podcast here. So thank you.
thank you. And if you are someone who has a positive story of recovery from a serious neck or back injury, then head to bedbackbeyond.com and click share your story. I would love to include you in the show. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you for having me on.